Hey everybody, Icy Cat here, and this time we're going to talk about a sorely needed castle rework concept. Whether or not he needs one is a controversial topic depending on how he's used. If people don't know what they're doing, he can be more of a headache than a help. But used in the right way, he can be very beneficial to the team and even sees use by the pros sometimes. Let's take a look at a castle rework concept in depth next. Castle hasn't had a significant rework since release, even though alongside Tachanka, he's been one of the most requested defenders to get an overhaul. Sometimes operator reworks come in major changes, like Laz getting the addition of the thermal scope when before his gadget never even functioned remotely like that. Other times a rework is a bit more subtle and just changes the parameters of what's already there or modifies them a bit, like the more recent Jackal changes that just alter the number of pings he gets and what happens to the prince after he scans him, but it's still fundamentally the same idea, just a bit tweaked. An easy change to Castle might be to just give him an extra fourth panel or something like some people suggest, but that kind of change doesn't really address some of his fundamental problems and weaknesses. Some of the problems he brings to the table don't have any great ways to fix. If a castle places the armor panels in bad spots, it can cause more harm than good. There's nothing that can really fix that. Some people have suggested fixes like having them be automatic doors that open quickly when a defender comes near them, but that's probably not practical as a gadget and comes with its own unbalancing factors, like defenders triggering them on accident when they're maneuvering close by and opening access to the objective. Likewise, it could be imbalanced against attackers. The slight delay and momentary vulnerability a defender has to deal with when ripping down a castle barricade gives an attacker a chance to respond if they're quick, especially with that very clear audio cue. Plus, introducing some kind of retraction motor and system into the panels makes them a whole lot more complex than they already are, and something like that might make them more vulnerable to other counters like Twitch or Thatcher, since they would now have powered, moving parts, rather than being the fixed objects they are now. When it comes to knowing when and where to place Castle's armor panels, that's going to come down to a variety of factors. Player's map knowledge, player experience, if that player is trying to combo with another teammate like a mute jammer, if they're being used to defend the objective, or instead if they're being used to funnel attackers in other parts of the map. These all come down to player placement and decisions which are subjective. In the hands of a newbie copper player, that's going to be rough, and in the hands of a pro, will be very effective. So if we acknowledge that the problem of poor placement decisions probably can't be resolved by a rework, then where does that leave us? Well, let's start by taking a look at his loadout. His secondary gadgets could be enhanced a bit. One common tactic is to throw a C4 at a castle panel as it's being hit from the other side. The problem with this for Castle is that he can't do that on his own panels. Only other players can. He does have those impacts, but that won't really get him the kill. Destroying the panel is worth it for an actual kill, not as much for just startling them. So if we swap one of those gadgets out for a nitro cell, his kit should be a little bit more robust. Next is his submachine gun. The UMP could use a bit of a rate of fire increase and a minor recoil buff. An improvement to both will help him be a bit more effective at getting those kills. This does provide an indirect buff to Pulse as well since they share the same weapon, but it's not doing anything that will make bad Pulse players suddenly good or something. These are relatively minor tweaks to his loadout that just smooth out the rough edges. Now let's take a look at his armor panels themselves. One big issue with them is that you have no idea when they're going to break. Most of the time you'll see the little melee hit holes when someone is beating on it from the other side, but you have no idea when that panel is actually about to break, especially given that if you hit it in the exact same place, only one damage mark shows up. If a panel has been hit a few times, and then the attacker gives up, neither attackers nor defenders really know how much more damage the panel needs to take before breaking open. Now there is a trick you can use where as a defender you hit the same spot 11 times, and to attackers it doesn't look damaged, and you can break through the panel on a single hit to surprise them, but that's about the only benefit to having an unknown damage indication for the panels. The first part of the panel rework I suggest would be to have damage states so that both attackers and defenders can clearly see how close a panel is to breaking. This introduces more balance for both sides as well as more opportunity. Essentially, you would have 3 damage states. Lightly damaged would be up to the first 3 hits. Medium damage would be 4 to 7 hits, and heavy damage would be 8 to 11 hits before breaking open on the 12th. This would allow attackers to see how close the panel is to breaking if they resume the work another attacker has started. It would also allow attackers to know if a defender had pre-hit a barricade to prep a jump-out vault through. It would benefit defenders as they would now have a clear idea how much more damage the panel would take before they are exposed, and give them more information to make better decisions on how much to trust that armor panel's state of health. The other big flaw Castle has is that pretty much everyone counters him. It wasn't so bad when the game first released, But now that there's so many combinations of attackers with explosives, there's just so many operators who can defeat the armor panels with ease. Anyone with a frag or breaching charge. Ashe, Zofia, Hibana, Kali, Sledge, Ying, Fuse, Maverick. As more operators come out, that list will only grow. Castle gets less and less relevant as time goes on. So what can we do about that? Well, let's start by slowing down Sledge. Breaking through in one hit as a counter made more balancing sense when there were only 10 attackers at launch. Now, not so much. So for balancing purposes, let's make it so Sledge needs to hit those Kevlar panels 3 times to break them apart. Now that's still 4 times faster than anyone else's melee hits to get through. Each swing would be the same as 5 melee hits. Swing 1 would cause medium damage, Swing 2 would cause heavy damage at the equivalent of 10 hits, and Swing 3 would break it open. This gives defense the chance to throw a nitro cell to stop Sledge, or to pull off a quick flank while he's doing his work. There's just no need to break these open in one hammer hit anymore, now that we're going into 5 years in with all these new operators that already counter the panels. The next operators that can calm down a bit against Castle are Fuse and Ying. Both of these gadgets can be placed on and puncture through the armor panels while delivering their payload on the other side. Plus, they each leave a hole behind to be shot through. Better to treat it like a reinforced wall surface. If Fuse tries to place a device on the armor panel, it will come up with the same text message, letting him know it's not a valid placement surface. Again, this made more sense at release for balancing, but by this point is just yet another weakness for Castle. Same thing goes for Ying. Armor panels are somewhere between reinforced walls and soft breach surfaces, but they are armored and should offer more protection than a soft wall when it comes to these kinds of interactions. Kali is the latest new addition that can shatter his walls. I get it to a certain extent. It is an explosive, but its micro shape charge is more about detonating on the other side as opposed to blowing through the surface. That's why it will work on reinforced walls, but not leave a hole behind. A reasonable compromise might be to do medium damage, but not outright destroy it. On detonation, Kali's lance would leave behind a mark similar to that found on a reinforced wall, and leave the panel with the equivalent of 6 melee hits worth of damage done to it, and a medium damage indicator. Don't worry, there's still Hibana, Ashe, and Zofia for explosive range launchers that will still take it out, and that's not even counting frag grenades and breaching charges. And let's not forget about this guy. There's still plenty of ways to counter his panels. More than enough, even after making these changes. So does that still leave his gadget weak? Well, it's definitely an improvement, but let's take things just a little bit further. When Castle's panels are put on windows, they cover the whole thing up, but when they're placed on doors, they have an open gap at the bottom to accommodate drones. Let's close that up. Sort of. The gap is still very useful for seeing approaching attackers that are trying to place a breaching charge or standing in front of it to melee it. We want to keep that visibility as well as the ability to shoot through it, but by placing a wire gate or screen on the bottom, we'll block physical objects other than bullets from passing through. This will stop drones from getting in and will increase their usefulness when used on objective. Even when used on non-objective locations to funnel attackers, it will still create awkward paths that block drones and they'll have to reroute. Now, this won't prevent a drone from seeing through. They can still scan and tag. It only prevents them from going further than the door threshold. If you're Twitch, you can even still fire your tasers through the screen and damage gadgets or people on the other side. You just can't go any further on that entrance. Most rooms have more than one entrance, and many have drone vent access for alternate ways in. It just makes an unpassable barricade for a drone. This would make Castle the first non-electronic anti-drone gadget, at least indirectly. This gives him much more use to the team than simply being a headache to get through and around. Now there's more value to placing his door in certain places to cut off drone routes or keep them locked out of objective. This is a sword that cuts both ways though, and that's good for balance. Any defender drones that make use of the gaps under doors would also be cut off. Echo would be unable to get his drone in or out, so make sure that he either has an alternate path or that you toss him out before the door gets paneled up. Same thing with Mozzie. If he captures a drone, they're going to be stuck on the side of the door they were captured on, so you'll need to find a way around for those. It's a fair trade-off to block out attacker drones and provides balance. This screen would also block grenades from rolling underneath as well. That's not exactly a game-breaking change or anything, but more of an added benefit. Rolling a smoke grenade underneath will cause it to explode on the attacker side of the door since it's blocked. Same thing with a flashbang or any other kind of thrown or rolled gadget. Now that won't stop frag grenades from exploding and destroying the door, it just means you can't roll them underneath the gap to do so. One concept people may ask about is why not allow him to work with electrical gadgets like Bandit or Kaid for keeping his panels safer from destruction. On the surface, that sounds like a really great idea until you think about a few things. First of all, Kevlar is non-conductive. Now maybe you could argue some metallic weave gets intentionally added in to make it conductive or something, but that doesn't address the bigger problem. As cool as it sounds on the surface, it would actually be totally unbalanced. The reason is because you have to retain the ability for an attacker without explosives, or that's already used them up, to still manually punch their way through castle's barricades. That's just a balancing thing. You can't make it so the objective is 100% impervious. A fully healthy operator punching an electrified surface 12 times is going to reduce their health so significantly that it does more damage than almost any gadget in the game other than like a nitro cell or impact grenade or something. Generally, if you need to melee your way into the objective through a castle barricade, it's typically pretty late into the round, and the attacker is probably more than a little banged up anyway. So you would wind up creating an unwinnable condition where they literally cannot get into an objective. So for balance reasons, you literally can't add that functionality if it creates an automatic loss under those conditions. So these changes would make Castle a more useful and stronger asset to the team. There's really no changes you can make that will make up for a poor player placement. That will sort of always be a thing for Castle, just like other reinforcements or barricades placed in nonsense areas. But these changes definitely address some of his severe weaknesses and grant him some added bonuses. So what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Now if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Click that notification icon so you're alerted as soon as new content becomes available. You can also follow me over at IcyCat25 on either Facebook or Twitter. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.